Producer Sean S. Cunningham originally conceived an action horror film in which Jason Voorhees would battle Freddy Krueger of the A Nightmare on Elm Street series. Paramount Pictures, who had released the previous 8 Friday the 13th films, negotiated with New Line Cinema over the rights to the series, and ultimately granted New Line rights to the Jason Voorhees character, but retained control of the Friday the 13th title. New Line placed Cunningham's idea for a Freddy vs. Jason film on hold, prompting him to generate a different script to precede that plot line. And so, 23-year-old director Adam Marcus would get his shot with his 1993 film, Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday.
Let them fight.
You're a wizard, Harry.
You're gonna need a bigger boat. I'll be back.
Death has come to your little town, Jim.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Chills and Thrills. My name is Connor Dunham, and I am back here for another Friday the 13th with Chris. And today we are doing Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday. So I have some problems with this film. I have some stuff I like about this film. Watching it when I was a kid, I feel like I loved it. It was something different, and of course, it was nudity all over the place. It was blood and gore, and being a young kid, I didn't really miss Jason so much as I do as an adult on my rewatches, because I clearly come to these films, or you watch these films, to see Jason stalking and killing people and whatnot. But as a kid, it didn't really bother me because, he was still in the film per se. He was just like body jumping and doing all this weird stuff. But no, on my most recent rewatch, I just turned my brain off and tried to have some fun with it. Didn't really pay attention to that. It wasn't the actual Jason body character doing the killing and it being in the film. So, Chris, I know you said you might have some love for this film from seeing it when you were younger. So, what do you think?
Yeah, so it was, as far as I remember, it was the first one that I saw all the way through. So it's weird when this is that, and it was the uncut version, and I'll just say that I was way too young. So, uh, yeah, all of the weirdness about this seemed totally normal for me, because when you're a certain age, you kind of just accept anything you see in a movie because you don't have that much of experience. And then you get older, and not just for this franchise, but movies overall, you realize how many weird, odd, kind of stupid things happen with this movie. And you know, I always enjoyed it for all the superficial reasons, the violence, the nudity, whatever, all the stuff that people come to the franchise for. And it's got, I'll just say, like, the biggest highlight of it is it has some of the greatest on-screen kills of the franchise, and I still think they're some of the strongest and most, gloriously, gory kills of the series. But outside of that, uh kind of the movie's kind of like this mess. The characters are kind of weird. It's kind of like it invents all of this lore, doesn't really fit with the rest of the franchise. Like everything about the movie in terms of the plot and the characters is kind of uh I don't like it very much. I'm not gonna say it's horrible, but it's really kind of odd and off the wall. Uh, it introduces all of these supernatural, demonic elements that were never part of the series before, so it's hard rewatching it now. It was shocking how much of this I was like, oh, I'm like, this is kind of really, not that good. But, it has redeeming qualities, but it's definitely not, if you'd asked me when I was 12, I would have said this one was my favorite one in the whole series. You ask me now, I cannot say that.
No, and I mean it's still it's one of the entries, like we said, when New Line kind of took over, and this was their like first film, and like supposedly there were rumors that said like the original director and like producer of a lot of the films, Sean S. Cunningham, like that he was like, I just want that damn hockey mask out of the movie, and then the
Yeah,
director Adam Marquez.
the director blames the producer, and the producer blames him. So it's like, okay, fine.
Yeah, it's like, all right, well, let's get to a story. Let's figure it out. I mean, fans clearly didn't want the hockey mask out of the movie,
Mhm.
and you can tell it hurts this film a lot. But I mean, the gore definitely helps. The character of Steven is probably one of the most beloved characters in the series. Um, Jessica, she's not too bad in the film either. The characters aren't terrible in this film. The gore is awesome.
Yeah,
It's
and
just the story.
as a if this were its own body hopping possession demon horror movie, I feel like it would be considered like a gem of the 90s. But the fact that it is sort of part of this other series and it's so off the wall for entry number 9, here's all of this lore. Jason's actually a body hopping demon. Here's this Creighton Duke guy that knows all of this lore, but you've never heard of him. Jason also had a sister who also has a daughter, and they're kind of the key to everything, even though none of this was ever brought up. There's magic daggers and things of this nature. It's just all so much thrown on kind of out of nowhere for no good reason, and it just it feels like a little bit of you know you either actively weren't fans of this series or you just didn't care. And it's like you might as it's like, what was this meant to be, some kind of reboot? I don't know. It's just there's a lot of oddities about it.
Yeah, it might have been different and might have caught on a little better if they did like a two-parter or even like their own trilogy of films with like beginning with a little bit of the lore in the first one, kind in number 9, kind of explaining it, and then another one that like brings in that he has like a relative and this and that, and is like, oh, he body hops, and then like with a conclusion of him like trying to track down the sister and the baby or something. I don't know, but then you get into like again a little bit too like Halloween and Michael Myers stuff with like the sister and
Yeah, and from what I understand, at some point, Tommy Jarvis was going to be either in the Steven role or in some kind of major role in this movie, and then none of that could get cleared up because I guess evidently, you know, there's people that argue to the contrary, but evidently it's very much just the Jason character that they got the rights to for this stuff to do Jason movies, and it feels very much, I never really thought about this strongly before in terms of continuity or canon or anything like that. But it feels very much like this was, Jason's never been a terribly supernatural franchise with spirits and demons and things like that. And the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise and Freddy Krueger very much has always been that kind of series. And so I feel like this was New Line kind of making a Jason that would fit within their Nightmare on Elm Street franchise more so than they were making the two franchises meet. So they're like, okay, Freddy's a nightmare demon and does all this, wild supernatural stuff. So we've got to give this wildly supernatural element to Jason introduced, and there's got to be spirits that come down and demon hands that drag him, and he's a body hopping demon and all this other stuff, like all of these things to kind of make it gel a bit more with their Nightmare on Elm Street franchise than what you would think would be the typical crossover of the two franchises. Sort of like, they make a new King Kong to fit within the Godzilla franchise for the Toho films. It's not the King Kong from the original movie. It's not that size of creature. It's this whole other giant King Kong on his own island in the Godzilla franchise. Like this is a unique Jason made just so it will line up with the Freddy Krueger series.
absolutely. I wanted to piggyback off you saying that they only got the rights to Jason, and that's why the Friday the 13th name is no longer in the next
Exactly.
couple films.
Exactly. And so and there are some, like we said, there are some of those sticklers that will make the case of, well, if they didn't even get the right to the name, then is this really even, is it truly kind of another franchise, or like a sub franchise, or should there be a big delineation between, hey, you have the Paramount Friday the 13th movies and you have the New Line Cinema Jason movies, and should it really be perceived as kind of another version of the character that's not really connected to the original series? And is it a new version for this new line section of the series that was being made? And that's a debate worth having, I suppose.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a mess, but I mean, I'll get into some background and information on the film before we continue. Jason Goes to Hell: The Final Friday is a 1993 American supernatural slasher film directed by Adam Marcus from a screenplay by Dean Lorey and Jay Hughley, based on a story by Hughley and Marcus. The ninth installment in the Friday the 13th franchise and a sequel to Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. It stars John D. LeMay, Carrie Keegan, Aaron Gray, Allison Smith, Stephen Culp, Stephen Williams, and Kane Hodder back as Jason Voorhees. The film was conceived by co-writer and director Marcus under Cunningham, producing and directing of the first film. After the low box office returns of Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, Paramount Pictures sold the character rights of Jason Voorhees to New Line Cinema, and Jason Goes to Hell was theatrically released on August 13th, 1993, becoming the second worst performing film in the series after Jason Takes Manhattan. The film was panned by critics and fans alike, criticizing its supernatural elements and elimination of Jason Voorhees as a physical character. So there's a little bit telling you that fans didn't like it, critics didn't like it. I mean, Paramount was embarrassed by it, so they sold them off, and still it the next film didn't go anywhere or do well at all.
Yeah, and I mean, when you see like the behind the scenes fluff pieces, they always say like, "Oh, Paramount was embarrassed of the franchise, and New Line Cinema was happy to have Jason," and all that stuff. And then within the first 10 minutes of their first movie, their first movie is about killing Jason, and within the first 10 minutes of their first movie, they blow Jason up, and then turn him into a body hopping demon. And it's like, oh yeah, New Line Cinema was so happy to have this character and so respectful of this character that they just completely reinvented it in their first film.
Yeah, it's a weird one. There's a lot to. I mean, like I said, once we get into like our characters and our scenes and like our favorite kills and or death of the film, like there's a lot to talk about because, like we said, the gore in this is awesome. Especially there's a rated and an unrated version. They're not too different, but when it comes to the
Oh,
gore,
they're kind of dramatically different. I mean, in terms of like every single kill and every single occurrence of nudity is like pretty heavily expanded on.
yeah, the gore, the difference of the gore in them is dramatically different. But what I was gonna say is that the story remains the same. But
Oh
if you're
yes,
a
yeah,
gore hound and stuff like that,
yeah,
then you absolutely want to watch the unrated version because it
yeah,
picks it up like three notches.
yeah. It's just the violence and sex, and you kind of get that sense of, okay, in the same way that the director of Part 7 said that they kind of raped his movie, and then it's like comedy where you have the build up and it's all about the build up and the punchline. And if you cut the punchline, which is sort of these violent effects, you're kind of taking the air out of the balloon every single time. And with this movie, not a great movie, not a terribly good entry in the series, kind of off the wall and wacky or whatever, but you can at least defend it on the strength of like, hey, they've got excellent kills and it really indulges in that, and it gets to be the kind of gore fest that the franchise kind of should or wants to be. And so like, while it's like the movie overall is like not very good, I don't really approve of it on like a concept level, it does deliver the goods in terms of the violence and things like that.
Absolutely, it does. I mean, it's a fun quick 90 minutes. I mean, if you've seen the movie, I mean, and even if you don't like it, you probably had somewhat of a good time watching it with the gore and some of the characters and stuff. But again, it's a lot of people, it's not their favorite. So, I mean, we'll see where it ends up on our ranking or tier list at the end of the episode. I will go ahead and get into a trailer for Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday, and then I'll go ahead and give us a plot synopsis, and we will come back with some quick numbers and got quite a few fun facts on this film, and then we'll continue on.
Gotcha.
Horror has many faces. Death wears many different masks. But pure evil wears only one. And this is your final chance to see it. Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday.
A few years after his supposed demise in Manhattan, Jason Voorhees returns to Crystal Lake and stalks a lone woman. The woman, who is an undercover FBI agent, lures Jason into an ambush where FBI SWAT agents attack and obliterate his body with a grenade launcher. Jason's remains are sent to a morgue where his still beating heart entices the coroner to eat it, allowing Jason's soul to possess him. Jason, in the coroner's body, escapes the morgue, killing another coroner and 2 FBI guards in the process. At Crystal Lake, Jason finds 3 partying teenagers and kills them while they are having sex. When 2 officers are called to investigate, Jason kills one of them and possesses the other. Meanwhile, bounty hunter Creighton Duke discovers that only members of Jason's bloodline can permanently kill him, and he will return to his near invincible state if he possesses a family member. The only living relatives of Jason are his half-sister Diana Kimball, her daughter Jessica, and her daughter Stephanie. Jason heads to Diana's house and attempts to possess her, but Steven defends her. Diana is killed and Jason escapes. Steven is blamed for Diana's murder and arrested. In jail, he meets Duke, who provides Steven with information about Jason and his relationship with Jessica. Determined to get to Jessica before Jason, Steven escapes from jail. He goes to the Voorhees house to find evidence to convince Jessica of her ties to Jason. Jessica's boyfriend, TV reporter Robert Campbell, enters the house and receives a phone call. Steven overhears the resulting conversation, which reveals that Campbell is attempting to spice up his show's ratings by emphasizing Jason's return from death, having stolen Diana's body from the morgue for this reason. Jason then grabs Campbell and transfers his heart to him through their mouths. Now in Campbell's body, Jason leaves with Steven in pursuit and attempts to possess Jessica to be reborn. However, Steven hits him and drags Jessica to his car. He tries to explain the situation to Jessica, who does not believe him and goes to the police station without him. Jason arrives there and kills all officers along his path to Jessica, whom he nearly possesses before Steven stops him again. In the resulting chaos, Duke escapes from his cell. Now believing Steven, Jessica accompanies him to the diner to retrieve Stephanie. Jason arrives and is attacked by the shop's owners and a waitress, all of whom he kills. Jessica and Steven discover a note from Duke telling them he has Stephanie and demanding that Jessica meet him at the Voorhees house alone. Jessica abandons Steven, meets Duke, and is given a mystical dagger with which she can kill Jason permanently. An officer enters the diner and gets possessed by Jason. Duke falls through the floor of the Voorhees house just as Sheriff Landis and Officer Randy arrive to confront Jessica. Landis is accidentally killed with the dagger, which Jessica then drops. Jason, possessing Randy, attempts to be reborn through Stephanie, but Steven arrives and kills him with a machete. Jason's heart, which has grown into a demonic infant, crawls out of Randy's neck. Steven and Jessica pull Duke out of the basement as the creature discovers Diana's body and slithers into her. allowing Jason to be reborn and burst up through the floor in his original body, fully clothed and masked. While Steven and Jessica attempt to retrieve the dagger, Duke distracts Jason and is killed. Jason turns his attention to Jessica before Steven tackles him through a window. The two battle outside while Jessica retrieves the dagger and stabs Jason in the chest. As the souls Jason accumulated are released, demonic hands burst out of the ground and pull Jason into hell. Though Jason tries to take Steven with him, Jessica pulls him free, leaving Jason to be dragged into hell forever. Steven and Jessica then reconcile and walk away with their baby. Later, a dog unearths Jason's mask while digging in the dirt. Freddy Krueger's laugh is heard as his glove hand bursts out of the dirt, pulling Jason's mask into hell.
Bravo.
All right, I'll hop into some numbers for you. This film had a budget of $3 million from what I found, with a box office of just under $16 million at $15.9 million, making it the third lowest grossing Friday the 13th movie, which, Chris, what is that with our inflation numbers?
Yeah, so that would be roughly equivalent to about a 6.5 million budget today, with a 34.6 million budget. Box office gross. And while the actual 15.9 million is higher than what Part 8 made in 1989, if you adjust it for inflation, Part 8's box office comes up to 36 million, and Jason Goes to Hell's box office comes up to 34 million. So in terms of the ticket sales, it was even less than Part 8, but it was a bit more in actual dollars, but some of that is due to 4 years of ticket price inflation.
Yeah, absolutely. That's that I didn't know that. I'm glad you brought that up, because yeah, with this movie being 4 years newer, I mean,
Yeah.
compare ticket prices from '93 to today, and I mean, you're looking at some bonkers numbers. So
Yeah, and look, we're using an overall inflation calculator, but in my experience, movie ticket prices generally, certainly in the last 10 years, they inflate at a rate that is even worse than the way that the average everyday dollar does. Like, the inflation of ticket prices kind of beats uh, the actual inflation of the dollar by a couple percentage points, from what I understand. So so even these numbers would be a bit more dramatic than it's showing here, but this gives you a general idea.
absolutely. This film is rated a 4.1 out of 10 on IMDb, a 16% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is actually higher than Jason Takes Manhattan, a 17% rating on Metacritic, which again is higher than Jason Takes Manhattan, and 73% of Google users liked this film, which is just below the previous film. So I mean, this Rotten Tomatoes and stuff actually liked this more than Jason Takes Manhattan, which is kind of a shocker to me.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose if you were to just watch this as a one-off, like, again, if your knowledge of Jason is cursory and you just know killer in a hockey mask and you just watch this one, then sure, like, I guess it's a better self-contained one-off story if you take no regard for what came before, no regard for what comes after. I would argue that, like, minute for minute, it's a sort of more entertaining and satisfying horror movie. But considering that when I was young, I had this one so high on my list, it's like this one does not, you know, I feel like I owe an apology to all of the movies I used to consider this better than in the series, because it's really like it's this oddball, it's this ugly duckling. It's like it's just as much, almost as much of an outsider as something like Part 5 is, and it's a shame. It's got great kills, and I'm not trying to hate it, and it's got some interesting things that it does, but you know Part 9 is not where you do this much of a departure. That's all I've got to say.
I agree with you. I can't agree more. I'm sure in this episode we'll say 10 more times that it has great kills, but it's not a great Friday the 13th film.
I can agree with that. I mean, the fact that it does not carry the Friday the 13th name is appropriate.
Yeah, absolutely. I this is some interesting numbers. These help the film. Excluding Jason being blown up in the beginning, there are a total of 22 deaths in this film, averaging to one death just over every 4 minutes.
That ain't so bad.
No, that's the quickest pace we have so far.
Yeah.
And then
See,
Jason
see,
has
you see those kind of superficial statistics that it has that make it easy to enjoy as a movie on its own, just not a great part of this series.
yeah, it's very very quickly paced when it comes to the kills and the action sequences.
Hmm.
Jason has a total of 13 minutes and 38 seconds of screen time, including 4 minutes and 26 seconds as Jason, 2 minutes and 40 seconds as Phil the coroner, 2 minutes and 13 seconds as the police officer Josh, and then 3 minutes and 29 seconds as Robert. And then, so I mean, we get a lot of Jason screen time in this, but it's only 4.5 minutes of the actual Jason that we want. So that kind of hurts it in my own opinion for the film.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think having the characters that Jason embodies all be unmasked and showing they'll kind of like grin or make faces and it's just weird to see Jason emote that much. So it's a little bit of an odd choice, and one of the biggest things I always think about with this movie is why, it would have been a really cool thing to do would have been to have Kane Hodder, because he has a cameo as a as like a SWAT strike team guy in the movie that the coroner kills. How cool would it have been to just get Kane Hodder to play the coroner, and then that way when he gets possessed, like he's still Jason playing Jason, so he would still have the body language and all of that stuff, but it would still be Jason in a new body, but you could have had Kane Hodder be the coroner. I thought that would have been a cool idea.
Absolutely. I mean, out of the few that we get, the coroner was the probably the best acted out of the body hopping Jasons we get. He was probably my favorite of the four that we got in this film. But I would have loved to see Kane Hodder, like that. Just would have been for fans who know who he is. It would have been a huge fan service and a fun 10-15 minutes of the film to see him walking around as Kane Hodder as Jason playing
Yeah,
himself, kind of.
and I think it would have been a pretty good transition because Kane Hodder would have still been doing all of the body language stuff, right?
Yep.
And but it would have been like as a guy. So then by the time you maybe get to another body, it's kind of more of a transition, but missed opportunities.
Absolutely, I agree with you. That would have been something. That would have been some good fan service. That would have got a cheer out of me. That's all I have for numbers for you. I got quite a few fun facts, so I'll dive right into them.
Hmm.
This first one, I'm sure we all know, but along with Jason Takes Manhattan and Jason X, Jason Goes to Hell is commonly considered to be one of the worst of the series, while others consider it good because it took a different approach to the series.
Yeah, I mean, you can say it a million times. Just being different does not make something automatically good. It can be good, but it can also be terrible.
Yeah, I mean it's developed again. Like I always think of Halloween 3 or something like that. It's developed its cult following, but it's 9 out of 10 people. It's not one of their favorite in the franchise.
Hmm.
The Necronomicon can be found in this movie in the Voorhees house. It was first seen in the Evil Dead films, and this film was also made a year after the Army of Darkness. The reason for this is that director Adam Marcus decided to include this as a way to insinuate that Jason is actually a Deadite, a type of demonic being formed in the Evil Dead series.
Yeah, I mean that's the young director trying to cook up some stuff that he thinks would be cool because he was a first time filmmaker and apparently a fan of Evil Dead. So that's him again, just sort of like overstepping his authority a little bit to say, okay, not only are we kind of inventing all of our own lore and fantasy elements of Jason and demonic elements of Jason, but we're also doing so in a way of trying to tie it into another franchise that New Line Cinema doesn't even have the rights to, and it's a guy. He's kind of like maybe he's got too high of opinion of himself, but he's doing a bit too much here.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I mean, you're trying to connect dots and lines that aren't there.
Yeah.
In the first shot of the Voorhees house, as Jason prepares to shave Deputy Josh, the sign outside the house misspelled the actual last name of Voorhees, giving it spell instead of spelling it Voorhees, it only adds one O to the beginning of the name. So it's like, how are you a director of a film and you're trying to give it all this lore? There's 8 previous films, and nobody catches that the name is spelled wrong on the sign outside of the house.
Yeah, and it almost feels, it just kind of feels like it lends more legitimacy to the people that really want to say, like, hey, this first, it's not, oh, 11 movies and then the reboot. They're the people that are very strongly in the camp of there's 8 Friday movies, then there's 3 Jason movies, and that those are 2 separate things. And every year I think about it, I'm like, you know what, like, they have more and more of a case than
For sure. This one's kind of cool. I wish I could like read the novels of these and stuff, but it says in the novel it said that after part 8, Jason's body is washed out of the sewer near Camp Crystal Lake. So this is why he makes his way back there. And it's like, what? Where the hell? What sewer is connecting from New York to Crystal Lake? No.
Yeah, and I mean, depending on where you look, there are the places that say, oh, they were ignoring everything but the first one and just making a one off. There are the places that say they ignore part 8. It's like nothing about the ending of 7 or 8 can kind of lead directly into this one. If you're going to start playing that game, the best you would have to say, maybe you go from the end of 6 into this one, because Jason's kind of like already at the lake and still alive. It's like at the end of 7, he's not got his mask. It was ripped in two and he was sunk to the bottom of the ocean. And then at the end of 8, he was basically melted and in Manhattan. So it's like you can't really just say that this continues off of 7 or 8 or is meant to. It's like at best you can say you could continue it off of the end of 6.
Yeah, it's a mess. It is an absolute mess. But when you sell, I mean, in my opinion, if you sell your rights from one film company to another, and they're gonna they bought it for a reason. They see money in it, so they're gonna try to push a film out real quick, try to
Yeah.
get the name back out there. And from the trailer, I love the trailer to this film. They're like, evil, like horror has many faces, but
Mhm.
pure evil has only one, and this is your last chance to see it. Like, I'm sure fans went nuts when they seen that. Like, they flocked to the theaters because they're like, oh shit, maybe they're finally actually doing like the last one. This is it. So they had a good marketing campaign for it.
Yeah, yeah. It just would have been nice if they had just started with a more traditional entry.
Absolutely. You and I talked about this next one during our talk about Friday the 13th, Part 5, The New Beginnings. So it says, thanks to Part 9, we can explain Roy Burns a bit easier in that in his angered state, he was possessed by Jason's spirit, explaining why he's able to take a lot of punishment and he is super strong at times in the film. So I don't know if I want to
Oh
make that connection,
gosh.
but they're trying.
Oh, oh, geez. I had never even heard that. Really. Oh gosh. I mean, I guess, dude. I mean, if that's what you want to try and do to kind of add an air of legitimacy, that's like a hindsight thing. That's a sort of going in after the fact. I guess, but I do not. I mean, whatever, dude. That's one of the worst entries in the series, trying to put a band-aid on another one of the worst entries in the series. And it's like, dude, you guys aren't helping each other out here.
No, they're swinging for the fences, and they're not even getting it out of the infield here.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
The director of this film, Adam Marcus, who served as an apprentice for editor Susan E. Cunningham during post production for Friday the 13th Part 2, was brought in by Cunningham to direct this film under the notion that he must remove Jason's hockey mask. Cunningham has denied ever telling Marcus to find a way to get rid of that fucking mask. However, Marcus rebukes Cunningham's claim and insists that he did not have that level of creative control. So that's kind of what we spoke on earlier, where they're both saying that it was one or the other's idea to get that mask out of the film and take this a different route.
Hmm. Yeah, and I mean, I guess we'll never truly know the answer. If you ask me, I think it's more likely that if I had to bet, as much as I don't really have a lot of love or respect for what Marcus was doing with this movie, in a lot of ways, I would say that generally speaking, Cunningham probably made that decision, and then with it being perceived as a bad idea, Cunningham is trying to save face years after by saying it was never his idea. You know?
Well, they found out it didn't work, and they went right back to basics after this, somewhat.
Yeah,
I mean, the
yeah,
next
that's what I'm
film
saying.
is.
Yeah. Yeah, like Cunningham was like, "Oh, get rid of the mask," and then everyone hated it. And he's like, "Oh, I never thought we needed to get rid of the mask. The mask is iconic." It's like, okay, sure, sure.
This next one you might know. This one is fun, but it definitely be an awkward situation. Michael B. Silver and Michelle Clooney, who play Luke and Deborah in the film, the couple who have sex in the tent and are murdered, had been a couple in real life, but broke up shortly before being cast. And this made for some initial awkwardness when they had to spend hours simulating sex in the tent.
Yeah, I did know that bit of trivia. I think it was from the audio commentary that I heard it. It's like, yeah, that's got to be a little awkward. That's got to be a little weird. But yeah, more, no comment.
Hopefully, it wasn't a bad breakup. No.
Yeah, I mean, at least they were getting paid.
Yeah, no kidding. No
You want
kidding.
you wonder, like, did this rekindle things? You wonder.
It's Cunningham had also demanded that the events of Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, be ignored. The filmmaker's initial pitch saw Elias Voorhees, Jason's father, digging up his body at the beginning of this film, eating his heart, and taking on his supernatural powers and embarking on a similar killing spree.
That would have been cooler than this.
I mean, at least there have been so many times they've talked about bringing the dad in, and for
Mhm.
some reason, I would kind of like to know why it never comes to be. Why do you always choose to go a different path?
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, that still would have been more compelling than this. Like tying it together somehow.
My last one for you here is in this film, before he handcuffs himself to Jason and at part of an immovable furniture, Creighton Duke says, "Son of a bitch, you remember me?" In the final film, this sounds nonsensical, but in the audio commentary on the DVD and Blu ray, it is revealed that in the script at one point, Jason killed Duke's girlfriend. His backstory initially explained that he was canoeing with his girlfriend in Camp Crystal Lake before Jason emerged from the water and dragged his girlfriend down into the lake. This is what led to his career in the police force, dedicating his life to hunting down Jason for revenge. And then this was ultimately cut for the final film.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been. I mean, the Creighton Duke character is one of those that, as a kid, I thought he was so cool, but then every time, like on this recent rewatch, I'm like, wow, this guy's kind of like a total jackass. I don't know, like he feels like he's just like needlessly a jerk to everyone for no real reason, and he's like, breaking fingers to give him to give information with Steven in the jail cell and all this stuff. It's like this dude's kind of just a douche to be a bit of a douche. And I used to think his character was so cool and awesome as a kid. And it's like he's not really all that, anything cool or special. And an extra bit of backstory would have been interesting. But it feels like the movie was kind of at conflict of having a Creighton Duke type character be the protagonist and having a character like Steven be the protagonist. And it just didn't really strike the proper balance. It's like they wanted this sort of like cold, calculated badass, but then they wanted this more human protagonist. And I don't know. I don't know. I've grown to dislike the Creighton Duke character quite a bit.
See, I loved him as a kid as well. I mean, he was probably my favorite character in the film when I was younger. I don't dislike him now being older, but he's definitely a dick. Like you said, he breaks Steven's fingers and like he randomly pops up and like takes Jessica's baby to the Voorhees house, where clearly that it's an unsafe spot for the baby, and like he he has some weird lines and line deliveries in this film as well. But I mean, he's definitely
Yeah, I think it's the filmmakers trying to they were trying to, do like I don't know if like too big for their britches or too ambitious, but they were trying to make this like cool iconic kind of character, and they just kind of made like it's a bit generic. Like I don't know. It's like they swung, and it's like it's like this is a misfire. You're trying to make like your cool, awesome, badass character who knows the lore and the rules and the mystery, and it's kind of just like I don't know. It doesn't work as much.
well, since I know that he probably isn't going to be your favorite character, and that's all I have for you for fun facts. How about I go ahead and ask who your favorite character was in the film?
Oh, that's easy. It's Steven. I think he's a solid protagonist or sort of central character. He's kind of like not very not got a whole lot going on in like the first like I don't know, maybe first chunk of the movie. He's kind of introduced a little late, but I grow to like him, and he kind of goes into kind of action guy mode as the movie goes along, and I dig it. He's a solid protagonist.
He was my pick for my favorite character as well. I mean, he's it seems like him like he's still like mourning over like him and his girlfriend breaking up, or like he in the film it says that he left her, but it's he finds out she's in trouble and he goes right for her. I mean, he steps up in a huge way trying to fight Jason, risking his life for her and everything. And he's someone you can easily follow and like, because he's getting the crappy end of the stick in the film. People think he killed his ex-girlfriend's mom and it wasn't him, and nobody believes him about this Jason stuff. He's almost like a lower rent version of the Part 6 Tommy Jarvis that we get, in my opinion.
Yeah, you can see how this was how a version of this was at one point meant to be Tommy Jarvis. Apparently, like you can see that. So yeah, it's that kind of role that no one believes him. He's the crazy guy, kind of a scenario.
Absolutely. He's just an easy character for me to like, and I think
Mm-hmm.
he's not too annoying. He doesn't do anything really stupid. He's just trying to protect his family and survive. So that's an easy choice for me.
Yeah, for sure.
I did have a favorite score for this film, and it was the main titles. I like them. They're very upbeat, and I don't have a lot to say about them, but it's a different spin for a Friday the 13th film to have like the soundtrack that this film has. It still has some of like the old nods to some of the previous work, but I mean, the main title was my favorite for this film, and that sounds like this.
My favorite piece of the soundtrack was the track called Moonshots, which is basically the music that is paired with the skinny dipping tent scene sequence in the film. That's kind of like the biggest throwback to classic Friday the 13th in the film. And like a big part of the fun of that sequence is the music is kind of like really perfectly synced to the action on screen. And so I just went with that track, Moonshots.
That was a good one as well. I mean, like you said, it has a lot of like superstition, and it's kind of like it's like a stalking soundtrack. Like they're being watched and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So I like
and
that
that's
one as
a
well.
and that sequence, those 2 scenes where Steven picks up the hitchhikers and then they're in the camp in the tent. Those 2 sequences weren't originally even part of the movie, and they were added to give the movie more kills, more sex, more violence, and at least one classic sort of campers in the woods getting killed by Jason scene.
And I'm glad they did because I mean I like those deaths. I mean, clearly we don't see one of them, but the two ladies we get their deaths, and one of them I'm sure we will talk about it. It's phenomenal. But
Exactly.
that's definitely a good soundtrack. This soundtrack isn't one to write home about or anything, but it does what it needs to do for the film.
Yeah, in some ways, it almost feels like it's a little, I'm not one to usually say like, "Oh, the music is overdone or heavy-handed," but like, you definitely notice this soundtrack all the time. Like, it does not hold back. It's very out there. It's like the director was like, "Oh my gosh, I want everyone to notice the music all the time." It is just all over the place, just da 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 da. Like it's all over. It's here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very loud.
Not subtle. Not
No,
subtle. We'll say
ab-
that.
absolutely. So, what was your favorite quote or most memorable line from the film?
Sure. So, it actually comes from that sequence where he picks him up and he goes, "Oh yeah, planning on smoking a little dope, having a little premarital sex, and getting slaughtered." And then later on in the conversation, they go, "Well, now that Jason's dead, we're thinking about smoking some dope, having a little premarital sex, and not worry about getting slaughtered." And that's my favorite exchange in the whole movie.
So, I had a feeling that we were going to pick the same one for that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I absolutely have that as my favorite quote right here. Uh,
Fantastic.
Not the exchange, but just the one from Steven, because where he
Hmm.
says it, and they all three just kind of look at him like,
Yeah,
and he's
it's a
like,
little yeah, it's a little meta, but I like it.
yeah, he's like, I'm joking, just a little Crystal Lake melody for you, and then they're
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, yeah, yeah. It's just it's a fun little call out to like previous films. Like they know that Crystal Lake is like a no go. Like you're
Mhm.
that they know they probably shouldn't go there, but they're like, yeah, Jason's dead, so we're gonna go there, and it's like I'm still not going. Get a hotel. Get a
Yeah,
go to somebody's house. Like
exactly.
my favorite scene in the film was I mean there's a couple good scenes in this, but I like the ending fight between Steven and Jason where he comes as soon as Jason is reborn officially at the end towards the end of the film, and he goes after Jessica and their daughter, and Steven kind of get away from there, you mother, and tackles him out
Yeah,
the window, and that he just takes a beating, and like he tries to hit Jason with a rake. Jason breaks the
yeah,
rake and like starts hitting him with the wooden stick end of it, and like he throws him onto a playground and stuff
mm.
like that. And he takes a beating, but in the end he saves his ex-girlfriend and his daughter's life, and it's just an awesome scene because like besides Julius, you don't ever really see anyone take on Jason.
Yeah, and it's Jason definitely sort of playing with his food a little bit. It's probably
Yeah.
the only situation where he's absolutely toying with his victim instead of just killing him. Uh, my favorite scene is actually the slaughter in the diner. I would have loved if the film could have been positioned in a way where after Jason got his proper body back, that was maybe, a sequence to kind of show him like he's back and he's unstoppable. Because he comes in that diner and he's jamming the one guy's face in the fryer. He he hits the one woman's jaw up into her mouth, and then there's the waitress who comes after him with the shotgun, and then tries to impale him with like a piece of rebar or something, and he pulls her onto it to impale her on it, and then crushes her head in his hands. And it's just this like great sequence of Jason just absolutely like wrecking shop and going on a little killing spree within a single location. And so that's my favorite scene in the film.
Absolutely, that is a good one. I like I believe the guy's name he throws his head in the fryer is they call him Pookie in the movie,
Yeah.
and he's a good comedic character when like Jason or Robert as Jason is coming to him and he's like, "Holy shit!" It's like slow
Yeah.
motion, and every time that gives me a little laugh. And then I can't remember the diner lady's name. She owns the diner, but like when he gives her like an elbow or like he hits her in the face with
Joey. She's called Joey, and I always thought it was
Joey.
so
Thank you.
weird. Yeah.
The look on her face when he smashes her jaw in is kind of comedic, and like so they knew what they were doing with this film because like clearly you wouldn't do that if it wasn't on purpose. But Vicky in that, and she ended up being my favorite kill of the film just because I don't know what it is with me. I like when they show like the brute strength of a killer, Michael Myers, Jason, and they grab somebody by the head, and you just like you can hear their head crunching, and they just crush their skull. Something about that just like gives me kind of like the chills because like you know they can feel it, but it's not going to last very long. But it'd be a terrible way to die. And then just the blood that like explodes like a volcano out of the top of her head is
Yeah.
just it that would be a horrible way to die. But I'm sure we'll talk about quite a few others because I have a couple runner ups, but I'll let you go for yours so I don't spoil yours first.
Yeah, absolutely. So my favorite kill is certainly the vertical splitting in half inside the tent. That's definitely the one that always just left the biggest impression on me. And I mean, it's just so gnarly that she gets impaled and then ripped up through her abdomen, and you see her, it like you see her two halves like fall to the side as blood is just like blasting out, and it's just this insane gore effect. And that's the one that always comes to mind whenever I think of this movie.
And that was one of the runner ups that I had is because you know it's coming. You see him grab that and you know what he's gonna do with it. It's like a stop. It's almost like a stop sign holder or something like a piece of
Yeah, or like the post, like the tent post, like the tent pole post that you
yeah,
sort of stab it into the ground, something
yeah,
like that. Yeah.
yeah, a fence post or something of that sort. I can't remember exactly what it is, but
For the purposes of Jason, it might as well be a javelin.
yeah, because he rams that through her, and you think, okay, she's dead. He might like take it out and like stab her once or twice more to make sure she's dead. And nope, he just rips it straight up through like her midsection and like collarbone, and it's just like, oh, all right, like
Yeah, that's a
it's a very
gnarly kill.
unexpected ending to the kill.
Yeah, that's a gnarly kill for sure.
Yeah, that is one for the books. I like the two cops that got their heads smashed
That's
together.
not
I
bad
thought the
either.
effect
Yeah,
was good. You know, it's
yeah,
something like that.
and from what I understand in the audio commentary, there was originally a much bigger, like it was almost like their heads exploded kind of a thing. Like it was much bigger than it was, but there was some like it was like a body in the background or some major continuity problem that just did not allow them to use that version of it. So they kind of the one we get in the movie is a little bit of a compromised, not as dramatic version of it. It's like, well, it's still a pretty cool kill.
Absolutely, and I mean the only other one I want to mention is like Josh melting down. The effects
Oh
for
yeah,
that
that one. That's probably like in terms of just being like a nasty gore moment. The melting body is just it's like freaked me out as a kid. I mean, the whole movie did, but that one in particular was just so disgusting to me.
yeah, with his jaw kind of like melting and like
Yeah.
ripping off, and his head
Mm-hmm.
sticking to the wall, and you can see his skin like
Yeah. Just
it.
insane.
It is a gross kill. It is a gross
Mm-hmm.
death. I mean, and it's like a 2 minute part of the
Mm-hmm.
film.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely that's one that you can be like, oh, yep, we got our money's worth for that one.
For sure.
What did you think of the look of Jason in this film? Because I used to have a Jason Goes to Hell mask, and I wasn't the
Mm.
biggest fan of the look, but I I seen The Mask at I believe it was like a Spencer's or like a Spirit Halloween or something when I was way younger, and I was like, I think it was only like $30, and I was like, hell, let me grab that, you know.
Yeah, generally, I think it's again, as a kid, with it being like the first one I watched all the way through, it just felt like, oh, this is what Jason looks like. So then when I saw him in other movies, I was like, oh, now he looks different. Uh, it's not a bad sort of like decaying, gross design. I'm divided on the whole, like his head's like the mask is like almost like embedded into his face, like the head's growing around and the edges of the mask are all kind of destroyed and eating into his flesh a little bit, like it's just like growing around it. It's I'm a little divided on it. It's certainly a pretty cool look though. I mean, his outfit's kind of basic, but the head and mask design is always it's a memorable one, I think.
It is. I actually
Yeah.
liked how it
I
seemed
would
like. Go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry, sorry,
Nope.
sorry. I would have loved for them to have an opportunity to take the opportunity that when he's reborn at the end, it's like, okay, so he's reborn into exactly the same damaged hockey mask, weird body that he had before. Like I would have liked for it to like they could have gone something dramatic and had him like in like a fresh body, so to speak. But they didn't really go for that.
Yeah, the only thing that I really want to say is like I like that his clothes and everything are all like tattered up and stuff like that. And then I like that it's seems like he's been wearing the mask so long that his skin and hair and stuff and what like has begun to grow around it. I did like that concept, but this isn't one of my favorite Jason looks, and it sucks because Kane Hodder plays Jason in this film. Same with number 8, and it's just they're not my favorite Jason looks through and like appearances throughout the films. But I mean, Kane Hodder's movement and stuff like that. The little that we do get Kane Hodder in this film, I still love it. But the Jason look in this besides the little bit that I spoke on, how his skin and stuff has like seemed to grow over the mask. This, other than that, this look really doesn't do it for me.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree.
All right, I believe you went first on our last episode for our ranking of the films. So I'll beat you to it, and I'll go first on this one and put Jason Goes to Hell in it with us. So starting from the bottom up, we'll go.
Yeah, go bottom up. Go bottom up.
All right, we'll go bottom up. Through 9 films, in the number 9 spot, I have Jason Goes to Hell: The Final Friday. In the number 8 spot, I have Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. Number 7 spot, I have Friday the 13th Part 5, A New Beginning. Number 6 spot is the original Friday the 13th. The number 5 spot is Friday the 13th Part 3. The number 4 spot is Friday the 13th Part 2. Number 3 spot is Friday the 13th, The Final Chapter. Number 2 spot is Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood. And still in number 1 is Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives.
Nice. So I'll have my number 9 spot goes to part 5 still. Number 8, I have Jason Goes to Hell. It doesn't have Jason, but it does have Jason, and the gore and the kills are insane. So it edges it over a movie like part 5. Then in the number 7 spot, I have part 8. Number 6 spot, I still have part 7. Number 5 spot, I have part 1. Number 4 spot, I have part 3. Number 3 spot, I have part 2. Number 2 spot, I have part 4. And number 1 is still Jason Lives.
All right, so not a bad list either way you go, mine or yours. Besides me having A New Beginning above 2 of the other films that might kill Chris's opinion of me.
No. I mean, each to their own. There's certainly like part 8, 9, and 5 are certainly in that sort of lower echelon, and on any given Sunday, there's reasons you might enjoy one of them more than the others. Like 8 and 5 aren't as disruptive to the sort of canon and the lore and the continuity as 9, but 9 has much better kills. But 8 at least has Jason, and 5 doesn't have Jason at all. And so there's different pros and cons to them, just in the same way that sort of like 3, 1, and 7 are in that sort of secondary, like middle of the road, and there's different things you could exchange about the three of them to adjust their placements.
Absolutely. Like you said, any given Sunday, it's just what do you want to turn your brain off and watch that for that day?
Hmm.
All right. Well, I'll go into some final thoughts on Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday. This film, like I've said before, we both kind of said this at the beginning that when we were younger, we loved this film. This was one of the ones I would watch all the time, just for the blood, gore, and nudity. That I didn't when I was younger, I didn't care about the characters. I came to see kills and Jason, and this film delivers on about one and a half of those aspects. But as I grew older, I mean, I can still appreciate it. They took a chance and did something different, and for some people it worked, and some people it didn't. But I'm in the group of people to where this film didn't really work for me. But I'll still, it's one of the films that I'll throw on randomly and just sit down and watch. I'll order a pizza, or if I'm making dinner or something, I'll throw it on the TV just to watch while I'm cleaning or making dinner before I sit down and eat. So I mean, it's still something I go back to, once a year. But I it is my least favorite of the series so far to this point. But I can still enjoy it and have fun with it.
Yeah, it's definitely, you know, when you're younger, you enjoy it. If you're a gore hound and you're looking for the violence and the nudity, and it gets to be the first entry in the series, sort of released uncut. So it was always appreciated that we finally got like, oh, the unedited version of one of these movies, and so it's good in that regard. And it's in the other way, it's like, oh, it's just another one of those weird one-offs. It's this sort of what if story. It's kind of like a one-shot comic book of like, oh well, what if Jason had all of this, a sister and all of this family lore and things like that. When you're younger, a lot of the kind of, I will just say for lack of a better word, dumb stuff in the movie, you just kind of accept it, and then when you watch it again later, it's like, okay, you know they're like they're putting babies in boxes in the back of restaurants. They've got magic daggers out of nowhere. They've they're it's a lot that it's doing, and it's like some of it's kind of like the Jason lore, and it's like, okay, now the series is all about these like these chosen one females, and like, so this lady's special, and she's the only way Jason can be reborn, and this woman is the only one who's able to kill him, and then you've got this bounty hunter who's the expert out of nowhere, just like all this kind of random stuff that just doesn't hold up when you're kind of watching it as an adult. And so yeah, it it's an interesting kind of one-off movie, but it's not a great entry in the series.
No, but it'll still, like I said, turn your brain off and grab some popcorn, maybe a friend, a girlfriend, whatever. Invite your brother or sister
Yeah.
over to your house, and you can still have some fun with it.
Yeah, if you're just a gore hound and you're just looking for, and I mean, if you're interested in some kind of like demon possession body hopping kind of slasher hybrid movie, like this is a solid movie. If you're more of a exclusively a fan of the Freddy Krueger movies, and then you just want to kind of pre-game a Jason movie before Freddy versus Jason, this movie kind of is much more at home in in a Nightmare on Elm Street marathon than it would be in a Friday the 13th marathon.
Absolutely, I agree with you. Clearly, why it was made by New Line Cinema, which is the house that Freddy built.
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah, it's no secret to say they're a little bit biased in who they prefer.
Absolutely. This film was followed up by Jason X, which was released in the US on April 26th, 2002. So quite a bit of break between those two, but we'll get to that on our next episode. So Chris, before we get out of here, as always, I will say thank you again for joining me. We're we finished the Godzilla franchise, and we are working our way and almost done with the Friday the 13th franchise.
Yeah, we're on our way through. It's nice to have a franchise that doesn't have 40 entries to worry about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, with 3 films left to go, well, I guess we'll have to see how our ranking lists differ and see where we go from here.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
But again, thank you for joining me on this one. Again, Jason X is next week on our next episode. So again, thank you for joining me. Thanks anyone who's out there listening, and until next time.
Planning on smoking a little dope, having a little premarital sex, and getting slaughtered?